All right, it's a Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Trying to, I've got my headphones in today. Somebody said I was pronouncing my P's a little too loud, and I tell you that's not a surprise to me. I know that that's been an issue over the years. I think even going back to the days in radio, I would hit that a little bit too hard. So I apologize for demonstrating right there. But it's really hard when you do a podcast, a daily podcast about Pitt on a show that's called the Morning Pitt, and it's for a website called Panther-Lair.com. And I'm trying to not emphasize the P a little too much, but it does get a little bit rough because, we say a lot of words that start with P around here. I'm Chris Peak, covering the Pitt Panthers on Panther-Lair.com, on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. There's a lot of P sounds in there. So I got the headphones in so we can maybe listen to it and get a better feel of when we're saying it too loud, when we're not saying it loud enough. I never wanted to be that guy who wore headphones during the show, but here we are. We're going to do it at least today to try and get these levels dialed in. All right, enough technical talk, enough of that stuff. Let's jump into the conversation today. I want to talk a little bit about the transfer portal because there's some news that came out yesterday from the coaches convention, but mostly our focus is on Pitt, Florida State. Panthers taking on the Seminoles in Tallahassee tonight. It's 9 p.m. tip-off, so it's going to be a late one, but we will get you started with a live edition of the Panther-Lair Show at 8 o'clock. Me and Jim Hammett will be hanging out a half hour earlier than usual. It'll be 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock tonight on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content, and you'll be tuned in when we go live tonight for a little pregame show. We will be live ahead of the game tonight right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But what does Pitt need to do to beat Florida State? Panthers have a chance for a quad one win. It's a big one. It's an opportunity to go on the road and get a nice victory, break the two-game losing streak. What do they need to do to get that win? I think there's a couple of keys, and I think I would tinker with the lineup in a couple key ways, as well as maybe one or two other things I think this team should probably be doing to help break that losing streak and give them a chance to like I say, get a big win and get a little momentum back on their side. So we got a lot to talk about. Transfer portal, Pitt, Florida State. There's a lot to discuss. Let's jump into it here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's one thing to not blow up the microphone with the P sound when I'm really emphasizing it and thinking about it. But once we get talking, I wonder if it's going to fade a little bit, if I'm going to just sort of lose the control and just start saying it. But anyway, this is the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm excited. We got a lot to talk about with the transfer portal and Pitt, Florida State tonight. Like I said, don't forget at 8 o'clock tonight, we will be live here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com to get you ready for the game. It'll be a little pregame show with me and Jim. We hope you can tune in and join the conversation. I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun, as always. Before we jump into Pitt, Florida State, there's some news out of the transfer portal that I think is interesting to at least make mention of and discuss just a little bit. I think it's relevant to consider and important because it's relevant for all these schools. So there's a coaches convention going on right now, the AFCA annual conference or convention, whatever they call it. It's always sort of colloquially referred to as the coaches convention. And I think it was yesterday they passed a recommendation to change the setup of the transfer portal window, where you've got a couple weeks in early to mid-December for one window, and then you have a week or 10 days or something like that in the spring, after spring camp, April into May, for the other windows. So there's two transfer windows in college football, and it's really come under a lot of questioning and scrutiny. Particularly with relation to players having to choose between going into the portal and staying with their team through the college football playoffs. Brabula, another thing that starts with a P, so I shouldn't have mentioned him, especially because he plays for Penn State. Which another P sound. What is going on here? I need to go cover San Diego State or something like that. But he became sort of the poster boy of this, right? He had to walk away from Penn State ahead of the playoff run so he could enter the transfer portal. And it became a question of, should they change the calendar? Should they change the schedule of the portal window in order to give these guys an opportunity to still be in the playoffs? And I think I mean, to me, the first thing you should do is move the playoffs back. Move them earlier in December. Move the bowl games back earlier in December. Don't take quite so much time off between the end of the regular season and even the end of the conference championship games and the start of the bowl season. Dive into it pretty quick, particularly since they had signing day basically the Wednesday after the regular season ended. So it's not even like coaches went out on the road for a couple weeks leading into signing day. So you wouldn't be inhibiting that if you move the bowls up, if you move that schedule up and maybe got, the playoffs ending New Year's Day or January 8th or something like that, as opposed to January 20th, which is what we're headed for here. I think that's far too late in the calendar. Of course, there's always the option that you could eliminate the conference championship games, which I've seen coaches sort of throw around there, mention it. Well, we just need to do away from conference championship games. That's cute, guys. That's really funny. Show me the part where everybody hands the money back. Tell me when that happens, because typically when a decision is made to, in the interest of making more money, which is why conference championship games were, invented in the first place, you typically don't walk that back and say, you know what? We would actually rather not have the money. So they're not going to eliminate conference championship games. They probably, given how many games you will now end up playing if you make it into the playoffs and deep in the playoffs, they're probably not going to eliminate or try and condense the regular season and move the conference championship games back to like Thanksgiving weekend or something like that. They're going to want to keep those extra bye weeks in. They're not really going to be too interested in starting the season earlier, starting in mid-August or something like that. So your best option is to cut down the window, the space of time between the conference championship games and the start of the bowl season and the college football playoffs. Now, there's only so far back that they're going to go, but what they've discussed and what the coaches sort of voted to, suggest or promote or recommend is a 10-day portal window in January. And no portal window in December, just a 10-day portal window in January when you be done with pretty much all of the regular bowl games, most of the college football playoffs, and potentially you could have the semifinals happening during this window and maybe the championship game happening after the window. But you would end up, I think, with more players at least having the option to participate in bowl season and the college football playoffs, not feeling like they need to bolt from their team and so they can get into the portal in the second week of December and then not be able to participate in the Rose Bowl or the Game Above Sports Bowl or whatever it may be. I think that's probably a pretty good recommendation. I know you're going to come up against it on the academic calendar, but there's a couple realities with that. One, if you look at Pitt, right, the ad drop period ends, I think, on December 21st, so next Tuesday. And that, I think, is kind of the cutoff where guys aren't really going to be able to get in after that. I think you need to be in by that date. So there is a cutoff point, a little bit of wiggle room for athletics where, if you or I tried to enroll, I'm not sure we would be able to get in after the enrollment deadline, but before ad drop, I think they could probably get the student athletes in at that mark. So, if you have a portal window that ends, that runs, let's say January 2nd to 12th, you'd be able to get in. You'd be able to get into to class before some of those deadlines hit. The other thing, too, is a lot of these guys go into the portal and have a pretty expedited process. It doesn't take nearly as long as the high school recruiting process. They typically have the NIL deals worked out. They take a visit. They say, yep, this is it, and then they're done. The visits aren't like these 48-hour affairs. A lot of these guys are only on campus for a day. They visit 5 schools in 5 days and say, yep, I'm going there, and that's it. Boom, boom, boom. They're ready to go. And so I'm not as worried about the scholastic calendar and not just like in a college sports, nobody really cares about school anyway type of way. I don't think you'll have a huge conflict there. The one thing I would say is I don't think you should eliminate the spring transfer window. And I know coaches want to get rid of the spring transfer window. Coaches want to get past the winter transfer window and say, okay, the guys that I have on my roster, I know I'm going to have this season. But I think you should keep the spring window for a couple reasons. Primarily from the player's perspective. I think it's good to give them an opportunity to go through spring camp and find out where they stand. If you have a guy who comes out of the regular season and he's on the fence about transferring, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. The coaches are telling me I'll get an opportunity if I really keep working at it, but I kind of feel like I'm not going to get that shot. Well, Give them one more spring camp to go through before they make a final decision. They come out of spring camp, they're still third team or fourth team or whatever it may be. Okay, then you go. But who knows? Maybe you come out of spring camp and you're firmly on the 2 deep. Maybe you've earned a starting job. You get that another opportunity to stay there. I think that spring window should be in place just to give guys kind of almost like a safety net. An insurance policy in case they decide to come back to spring camp for one more try with their school, just to see where they actually end up fitting in. And then I think for coaches, coaches don't like to lose guys in the spring, but the reality is that spring portal window also offers you an opportunity to fill out your roster. Say you had a crucial injury that you suffered in the spring, or let's say you lost a couple of guys, or you didn't fill a need or two that you really needed to fill, or you didn't fill it the way you wanted to fill it during the winter transfer window. Well, spring gives you one more chance to add a couple of guys, and they might be good, and they might not. You might get something out of them, you might not. Jordan Addison went in the spring transfer portal window, obviously did well for USC. Pitt last year added Chief Borders and Jeremiah Anglin and Anthony Johnson. And I think Johnson would have played a lot and played well if he hadn't gotten hurt, but Borders and Anglin really didn't do anything. So it's a mixed bag on what you'll get there, but I think that window should still exist as they work to sort of refine this process and get it into something more manageable that still fits the needs for all parties, coaches and student athletes. So I like moving the portal window, after most of the bowl games. I still think you could condense the bowl schedule, or at least condense the space of time between the conference championship games and the bowl games, and that would help you as far as this whole process of what they're trying to do. You could also move the college football playoff schedule and have it overlap even a little bit more with the rest of the bowl games. You could move it up. It doesn't need to go until January 20th. You don't need to be playing the national championship game on MLK Day. You can move it up and play it earlier in January. But that's just me. I'm not the commissioner of college football. Whoever ends up being the commissioner of college football, maybe they'll take that to heart. All right, Pitt at Florida State tonight. It's a quad one game. Florida State, as of yesterday, was number 71 in the net rankings. Pitt, of course, still in the top 30, but it's playing at number 71 on the road will give you a quad one opportunity. So that's what's in front of Pitt right here. And I think it's a big opportunity. It's a big opportunity because it's a quad one game. That's a great resume boost to go on the road and beat a conference opponent, particularly one that's ranked inside the top 75 as Florida State is. But also, obviously, to break the 2-game losing streak and get a little bit of momentum back. Some things I think Pitt needs to do starting tonight that are not just specific to facing Florida State, but specific to what this team needs to do better. One is to shoot more threes. Shoot more three-pointers. Pitt is 6th in the ACC in three-point attempts, or they were going into yesterday, 6th in the ACC in three-point attempts, but they were also 6th in three-point field goal percentage and 4th in three-point makes. So even though they're not as good of a three-point shooting team as they were last year, those numbers were kind of buoyed by Blake Hinson. I think they're a good three-point shooting team. I think Damian Dunn is useful from three. I think Zach Austin has been a revelation from three. And the two guards, Leggett and Lowe, Brandon Cummings is good from three, and Leggett and Lowe can make their shots. I think Lowe is still not where he needs to be, but I also think he's not where he could be, shooting under 30% from three so far. He has attempted 84 three-pointers. Last year, on the whole season, he attempted 88. So obviously there's a volume element at play. But when he attempted 88 last year, he shot 35% on those 88. This year he's attempted 84, so 4 fewer than he attempted all of last season, and he's shooting under 30%. He needs to bring that percentage up. Keep shooting a lot, but bring that percentage up, because I think he is a better shooter than he has shown, and I think he can shoot at a higher percentage than 35%, or 28.6%. All of those guys, I think, are good, useful shooters. You know who's one of the keys to getting this team's three-point shooting elevated and giving them a better chance to win? It's Guillermo. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is one of the best three-point shooters on this team. He should be shooting more three-point shots. We've had lots of conversations on the message boards about what kind of shots he's taking and if it's different types of shots and how he's had to adapt to it. I've asked Jeff Capel about it and all these different things. But, like, the reality is, I think for this team to reach their ceiling or even get close to their ceiling, Guillermo Diaz-Graham is going to have to be shooting threes and shooting a lot of them and making a decent amount. I think it's one of the biggest problems that have arisen in the last two games is Guillermo's not shooting as much. You know, if you look on the season, he's averaging, and this includes the last two games, he's averaging 3.6 three-point attempts per game. So less than 4 attempts per game. But in the last two games, he's only attempted 2 three-point field goals. He was 1 of 2 on those 2. In the previous 3 games, right? The Stanford, Cal, and who'd they finish up with? Sam Houston State. Guillermo's 5 of 10 from 3. So he attempted 10 over those 3 games. He has attempted 2 in the last 2 games combined. They need Guillermo to shoot more. They need more three-point shooting overall. Our guy Steven Gertz had a great film breakdown from the Louisville game where he pointed out how teams are defending Ishmael Leggett differently because there's less of a they're not concerned about Pitt shooting from 3. So even though the Panthers are 6th in the ACC in three-point field goal attempts, they have taken decidedly fewer in the last few games. 20 at Duke, 21 against Louisville. Now, those sound like impressive numbers, but on the season, Pitt's averaging 24 three-point field goal attempts per game. So they're shooting less. They shot less against Duke and against Louisville. They need to shoot more. It's not as simple as that. I don't want to oversimplify it to that, but that's the reality. They need to shoot more. I think it'll, first of all, it's going to generate more points, but I think it'll help open things up for Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe with the things they try to do. Maybe Damian Dunn being back in the lineup can help with that, get more shots out of him, but he needs to shoot. Zach Austin needs to shoot. The guards need to shoot. And Guillermo needs to shoot. Now that Damian Dunn has been back for a couple of games, I also think it's time to change the lineup. I think it's time to put Damian Dunn back in the starting lineup. I think it's time to bring Zach Austin off the bench. I think, look, the major issue here is this team is lacking at the power forward position, right? They don't really have a 4, or they don't have more than 1 4 that you can really go with, okay? I think you could still start Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Cam Corrin together. But I think their minutes on the court at the same time need to be minimal. I think you start with those guys, with the 3 guards, with Lowe, Leggett, and Dunn. And then I think once you get into the game, maybe the first media timeout, or if there's a foul, or just you feel like it's time, you send in Zach Austin for Guillermo Diaz-Graham. You play. Your next sub is Guillermo for Cam Corrin. And those 2 rotate, occasionally with Papa Conti coming in for most of the rest of the first half. Now, you run into an issue of Zach Austin then playing 16 minutes in the first half. Well, you don't necessarily need that. So at some point, you sprinkle in Guillermo back at the 4, either with Cam Corrin or Papa Amadou Conti. But most of the time is spent with Corrin or Guillermo rather than both of them together. There are dozens of people on the message boards who are like, yeah, idiot, we told you this since the summer that we didn't think Guillermo can be a 4. I don't know if he can or not, but I just think, the best approach going forward is probably to get him more minutes at the 5 and split those 2 up. And you can mix and match with what you do with the other positions. You've obviously got Lowe, Leggett, and Dunn. You can rotate Cummings in, and then you have Zach Austin. If Amsal Delilich could become playable again, he could get minutes at the 4. Jorge Diaz-Graham could get minutes at the 4. There are other guys you could put in there, get a rotation going with Guillermo and Cam Corrin, still start those 2 guys at the same time, but pretty much after that, you go back and forth, and you rotate those 2. I think they're going to find better opportunities, and potentially the rebounding could improve. I think Guillermo Diaz-Graham, I was looking at evanmaya.com, Guillermo is one of the highest-rated individual defensive players on this team, right behind like Damian Dunn. And so I think he can give you something there defensively. He's not going to be great. He's not going to be a great defender, and we know that, and I think basically what you're going to get out of Guillermo and Cam Corrin. So with that knowledge in mind of knowing what you're going to get out of those guys, you need to adjust your lineup and your expectations accordingly. And that means, I think that means rotating those guys. Changing the lineup, changing how you approach the lineup, bringing Zach Austin off the bench again, and using that to get into a rotation at center. That's what I think. That's what I would do. But I'm not a basketball. I mean, I'm a youth basketball coach, which doesn't give me any expertise whatsoever because nobody listens. Nobody listens. You tell them to do this, they do that. So you basically just say, hey, can we pass the ball to our best player and see if he can score? Maybe I am a basketball coach. All right. Don't forget, tonight, 8 p.m., we will have a live Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Jim Hammett and I will be here talking a little Pitt sports for an hour leading up to Pitt, Florida State. We'll try and get some of our friends to join in. That was fun. We did that last year for a game. We can do that again this year. I think that'd be a good time. And we'd love to have you join with your comments and questions, as always, in the chat screen. We take your comments and questions. We have a little conversation. It's a back and forth. It's a lot of fun. And hopefully you can tune in. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And don't forget the message. Don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. I hope I made it through without too many big P sounds here on the old podcast. But if you have thoughts on the audio or the video, and we're doing the best that we can. I can't change my face. That's always going to be here. But if you have thoughts on these things, give us let us know. We'll keep trying to fine tune it and make it better. Like I said, look, I got my headphones in to listen to it. So, all right, thanks for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Wednesday. We'll see you tonight on the live show, and then we'll have another Morning Pitt for you tomorrow morning here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.